went through some things like that.
You've been a busy lady. Are you catching up?
It gets busier, but it's work time.
Okay, you ready?
Good. Good luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. If you would turn your phone aside. I'd like to call to order the Madison County Planning Commission work session for June 4th and ask the secretary to call it up.
Bill Glass. Here. Brian Adams. Here. David Buchanan. Here. Mary Ockford.
Here.
Seth Fritz. Here. Shannon Kingston.
Here.
Robert Farmer.
The first order of business we have is the conduct of transportation commission presentation. You want to start that first, bring us up to speed on what
Casey Smith and Brent Schwager from, I guess, hope y'all came up these, yeah. They've been involved in they've been doing a study of, everybody knows of all the development that's taking place in the Barnesville Road, State Street Road, Jack Street, Goggins Lane, I-75 Richmond Center, all that development that's has been going on and continues to go on there. So there was some money allocated to do a traffic study in that area. It's called the West Richmond Traffic Study. They're here tonight to present the results of that study and maybe talk about some steps going forward for you all as a body that might be prudent for us to look at some of our regulations and decide whether or not we want to include some of their findings in our regulations, whether or not that'd be a good idea for us to do. There's no tool made where each tool box can either approve or deny certain developments based on future planning. So we are rights planning commission, so we're looking down the road what might happen in the next 15 or 20 years. They're probably projected that farther than that. I'll stop talking and let them come up and tell you what they got.
Good deal. Let's go. If you would introduce yourself so we know who you are.
Absolutely. Got any presentation, Bert?
I do, yeah. I'll show you some.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bert. And again, my name is Casey Smith, and I'm with the Transportation Cabinet's District 7 office in Lexington, where I'm in the supervisor of the planning division over there. I'm here with Brent A. Swagger, as you can see on the presentation there. Oh, okay. Perfect. And he is actually with the strategic planning branch over in Frankfurt. So Brent and I, we co-manage this study of the West Richmond area. And what's really fascinating about this study is that, there is some transportation aspects with it, but it was also an evaluation of some of the future land use and how it would affect the transportation needs in the future or in the long term. I think what really makes this study unique is that the success or the outcomes that came out of this study is not entirely based on what the state could provide as far as improvements or some of the actions or implementations that come from the state. It also involves a lot of the local officials as well as future policies that those locals could adopt. It's a coordination effort between state and local governments at the local level, and it really, I think, is it's a really good demonstration on what well thought out planning could achieve and what we're actually capable of as we move forward and seeing this area grow within the Richmond area. Now, this study began as Well, this study began as a conversation with Representative Frazier Gordon, and she was talking about a lot of the traffic that you all are experiencing over on Barnesville Road, particularly a lot of the queuing that happens on the exit ramp off of I-75. We were looking at a corridor study at that time. It did make it into the highway plan with $155,000 or so to conduct this study. However, before we actually began the study, we actually had a meeting with Bert as well as Kevin Cossey, the City of Richmond Planning, to get a better idea or to really iron out what the scope of this study is going to entail. And with that meeting, it actually made us realize that that this is not just going to be a corridor study after all. In fact, it would actually be looking more at the future changes of the land use as the land use is identified as far as generating traffic within our system. So land use was a really heavy topic of discussion throughout this study, and I think we'll be seeing that as we do this presentation. So corridor study may not actually be sufficient for the needs of this area, so that's why we have to look at it as an all-encompassing transportation land use, small urban area study, as you see here. The study area consists of not just Barnesville and the interstate, but we extended it out to this region, this red line area that you see here. It includes Barnesville around the south side, pressure pipe going out to the west, K Street, Jeff Street pipe to the north, as well as lines 75 over to the east. It's approximately 10,000, 11,000 acres in the area, but that was really the focus points that we were looking at as far as improvements on the transportation network in this area. So as with a lot of our plan studies, we do look at the existing conditions of the area. One of the items we look at, of course, is crash history. Safety is a really important component in transportation, particularly lately with the new administration. As you'll see, that there are clusters of collisions that happen on US 25 as well as Barnes Mill Road, kind of close to where the interchanges of exit 87 and exit 90 are located. Really should not be a surprise that you'll see clusters over there because 80% of the collisions that happen in this area are rear ends and side swipes. These are very characteristic areas that have an abundance of traffic signals in that area. Traffic signals only work whenever people follow them, and sometimes that doesn't happen. And so we do tend to see a lot of rear ends and side swipes through those areas. Not to mention the people driving in all sorts of directions, trying to get to where they are going at those intersections. There's a total of 1,472 collisions that were recorded between 2018 and 2022. One actually resulted in a fatality in that time period. 254 involved one or more injuries in that collision. So, like I said, 80% of the collisions that we see here are actually rear end and side swiping type of collisions. Another thing that we look at are the current traffic numbers. These are the average daily traffic. Just on an average, normal, general day, Wednesday, boring day, just like any other, that we count along these roadways. You'll see, obviously, there's about 7,500 vehicles that travel there. But if you look between Guys and I-75 on Barnesville, you'll see that there is a heavy number of traffic along there, 12,750. And then you get to the bypass where it really begins to increase between the interstate and eastern Kentucky. So that is something that we like looking at to see as the future progresses how much are those traffic numbers going to increase over a long period of time. And that's when we started getting the local officials and stakeholders involved in meetings to talk about what are we anticipating in this area, what future development, what densification of land use is going to happen in this area. And as you can see on this map, these are some of the items that we identified, and this were what we had approximately 6 months to 2 years ago. This may not even be up to date. You may already know of some preliminary classes that are going on in this general area. That's the information that we had at this time, including the middle school. Of course, the Parks and Rec has their sports complex that is coming up over there at the Taste Creek and God's Lane area, which I believe is already in construction, along with several subdivisions. And all that generates traffic. So in taking those numbers, our traffic forecasting professionals looked at this, and these are the numbers that they are projecting out to 2045. You'll see at God's Lane, we got 18,500 on that roadway, 22,200 on Barnes Mill Road. So obviously, something needs to be done. However, it does not have to happen immediately, and that's where the planning or the staging of all these improvement concepts come about. In this study, we evaluated short-term improvement concepts and long-term improvement concepts, and some of them that we are going to be seeing in the next 2020 2024 highway plan. And so Brent is going to take over the screen and you'll be discussing some of those items that we talked about through the study.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Okay.
You said it doesn't have to happen immediately. Well, who has the power to say to the middle school, you're not gonna open next year? Because that would be cause an immediate increase of traffic on that road on days, 5 days a week.
Yeah, so the numbers that he's showing right here, that's considering the middle school, but it's also considering,
Yes, but
Well,
I'm saying the need is more immediate than I'm hearing.
Well, you might have took that a little bit, so there are short-term and long-term concepts on here. All of this doesn't have to happen at the same time. There will be stages when we implement it. Now, and that doesn't mean that we can tell the school, no, you cannot open over here because our roadways aren't going to, handle it. They could still open up their schools. It's just that, there's certain consequences, if that happens and that.
It just seems to me the school just empties on and off one road.
well, I think
And we're gonna
you're
get to
thinking
that.
a really important point right there. So through our study, we came up with a number of recommendations. And I'm not going to run through all these. We'll give you access to the report so you can take a look if you're interested in it. But these are, like Casey said, ones that are some that can be done fairly quickly because they're fairly low cost or not too difficult to implement, and then some that are going to be a long time coming because it's going to take large dollars to make it happen. And then there's some things that can be done through the development process, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But let me focus on just a few of the improvements, the bigger improvements that we recommended in the study. So the interchange was recognized as a problem location. This was, as Casey mentioned, one of the things that generated in the study. So we looked at a couple of different layouts to try to find what would be the most efficient and safe and cost effective. And certainly this layout here, so just so you understand the diagram, the red is what would be new or reconstructed roadway. And so you see the ramps sort of go in towards the middle, and then the yellow is what the existing, but would be demolished and not reused. So this type of design is very efficient, but it's not cheap to build. So,
Like a change over time.
no, it's not. Although we did look at that as an option here, and it still could be an option, but this was the one that seemed to make the most sense.
So you're feeding all the traffic to the middle.
That's right. So you only have one traffic signal in the middle there, and so by doing that, you can have everything going in what we call two phases. Like the through movements go, and then the ramp movements go. So
So you get rid of the Winchester Road, New Circle Road, interchange.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
All over, yeah.
That's right.
yeah, that's a good example. On Barnesville Road, number of issues, obviously capacity and traffic flow were and some problems with that, also leading to those high crash numbers that we saw in the crash diagram. So this would be a vision to then create more orderly flow, to separate traffic using a median, so you control your turning movements, you provide opportunities to do U-turns at certain locations, and you can see that this adds in the ability for people to walk and bike through the corridor. So that concept of walking and biking is throughout our study. It's something that's important. I don't know how much you all talk about that in terms of making your area more livable. But anyhow, so this is the vision, at least at this point in time, of what Barnes Mill Road would look like.
It's facing the interstate.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. Hampton Ways or the Burger King,
So this would extend this idea all the way over to Goggins Lane, and then there's always the possibility of going beyond Goggins Lane at some point in the future. But really, the Goggins Lane is sort of the key location. another thing we looked at was how, you talked about all the people at the middle school going on the one road. Well, if you just build a bunch of subdivisions and you build, everybody's gonna wanna go on the same road, but what's worse than the same road is going through the same intersection, because that becomes a choke point. So we were looking at what can you do to improve the traffic flow as well as the safety at different key intersections.
Everybody looked at the school, and I'm sure they've already done this, and I don't have privy to this knowledge. But it seems to me when you go to any school in Madison County and surrounding counties, during delivery of children and pickup of children, you see on the main road, big long lines of backed up cars. And it seems to me also that the school system should be preparing car storage concepts where the roads would go around the back. Maybe they've done that in this case.
So, Judge, the last school that this board looked at, jurisdiction of this school was Boothboro Elementary. Now, they're not required to abide by our regulations, their state agency are required to present to us. And then we can make suggestions, recommendations, and one of the suggestions that this body made was to increase that holding lane for pickup. And it seems to have worked pretty good out, but you're out there quite a bit. I don't think you get the backup in Boothboro that you get at a Kingston or a Madison or some of those you're talking about.
Yeah, that is a major problem. If people say, you get there, pick up your child 2 hours early, you're sitting there in the traffic and cars are trying to get around.
Yep.
It does seem.
It's a real issue everywhere, and I was just reading something today, talked about school transportation and the percentage of kids that used to walk and bike back in the 60s versus now. It's, a huge difference, like half the kids used to, now 10% do. And then if you look at school bus transportation versus parent or grandparent drop off, it's reversed on the graph too. So it's a real issue, and hopefully that was.
I just wondered, did anybody at the state level making any effort to talk to these schools about?
Yeah, certainly when it's on a state road. Of course, Goggins Lane is not a state route, so that would the transportation cabinet wouldn't have been involved in that. So intersections, yes, a key piece to this whole thing, working both relatively short term and long term. So that was a couple of the big recommendations, especially on the key road of Barnes Mill. But we also realized that the network, there has to be a road network beyond just the state roads. Okay, you have a decent number of state roads here, but we looked at your comprehensive plan. This whole area is it's colored in a way that the future land use could and maybe likely will be heavy residential with some commercial. And so if you're gonna continue to build at the pace you're building, you can't let all the traffic just be on Goggins Lane and just be on Barnes Mill and on Tate's Creek and have to go through those two key intersections. It's not gonna work, it's gonna fail. And so what we wanted to look at is an alternative network that could be built to support this development. So there was a couple, well, really multiple pieces to the recommendations in our study, but we used our planning and design firm to do some layouts of routes that they thought would work based on what was out there, trying to avoid creeks and existing subdivisions and things like that, to lay out a redundant network of roads. And why is this important? Well, what it does is it starts to provide options, that connectivity between different land uses. If you're on Barnes Mill Road to the west of Goggins and you want to go up to the new park in the future, maybe you don't have to go through that big intersection, but you can take an alternate route. If you are trying to plan for school transportation, maybe you don't have to have all school buses and the parents driving on one road. Maybe you have some other options. Same thing with your garbage pickup, your mail delivery, your Amazon, all these things that need to happen. If you start to provide connections between neighborhoods and those other land uses. So this can increase mobility. You'll notice that it's laid out in a fairly curvilinear way. This is not, we didn't lay this out to be a bypass. We did not lay this out to be a high-speed bypass, which is what we see typically, or so very often in smaller cities. This is really meant to serve the local development and to serve the people that live and come to this area.
I have a question. When you start putting more and more intersections on these roads that already have large traffic flow, Jack Street, 10th Street, all of these back down in here, you're creating another intersection. Looks like you're creating another block there. It's just a block here and a block here and a block here.
Part of it is, if you're concerned about safety or traffic backup, it's something that has to be considered. But if the more you have these interconnections, once again, you're taking some of the traffic that's in the major intersections out of there. We also are starting to do things in the last 10 years or so a little bit differently on some of these roads, where we're allowing either roundabouts, which are a very safe type of intersection, or we call them R-cuts, but they're basically where you come to an intersection on a minor road and you have to turn right and do a U-turn. And then I don't know that we had a lot of that in terms of recommendations here, but super long term, that might be something that's needed on Tate's Creek if that's ever having to be widened.
Well, and that's the thing I was looking at. I'm familiar with Lexington, and I know that's where you've been building that. There's
The what?
those interconnecting roads that are a little bit farther out there, past Ford or past some of the other roads that are high-speed connectors to some of the roads. But the roundabouts is a way to get away from having to stop completely.
That's right.
And that's what the problem ends up being at every one of these out there.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to do is start introducing traffic signals on these routes, because although they can solve some problems, they can often cause more problems. So if you can avoid that, then you're.
Yeah, that is very showing an intersection on here.
It may not be.
It may not be a traffic signal, it may not even be a four-way stop, it may be one stop sign
That's right.
coming out on the yard and everybody else keeps going.
It's, the new roads and all that would be great. How would you intend to go about getting the property to Maple?
All right, we're gonna get there.
Okay. All right.
We're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Right now, I'm just trying to lay out the importance of doing this, because otherwise, Goggins Lane, and I guess I've heard a little bit of the history, but that was an intentional road improvement done locally many years ago, and served the community well because it was planned out, and it was, I don't know how it was paid for, but it was paid for. Right, but it's not going to last very long in terms of its usefulness if you don't have some other supporting roads, or unless you start to change. If you change that, you don't want to develop this area. You got to pick one or the other, I think. So this is a vision that we worked to come up with, and the idea that all those red routes that we just showed you would be ones that would support development, would make it walkable and bikeable, and be aesthetically a nice place where people could live and get to and from whichever mode they use.
This all looks good, but it would look better so we can understand it if you had backed up cars on all of these lanes. So we can see what that's gonna look like, because that's what's gonna happen. It won't just be a couple except late at night. There's gonna be a line of cars that are.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Casey talked about looking at the traffic numbers and looking at the future traffic numbers. Our consultants put together traffic models, okay? And what they did is they modeled these different layouts, whether you had these roads or you didn't have these roads. And in reality, most of these roads, unless you increase your density, and right now most of this is in, I forget the density you're allowed to have in your rural areas. years, but it's not super high. So based on that, the traffic volumes are not gonna be that high. You're not gonna have the traffic congestion on those red routes that we're talking about. So,
Right there. I
hear that, but when I say it,
That's right.
I will believe it.
sure.
Get that on the record.
I promise. I'm from the government.
Yeah, that's what.
All right, so we're gonna give you some thoughts on, how do we have all these ideas for projects, both state roads as well as existing local and potential future local roads. So the thing that most people go to is we got to get it in the highway plan, the 6-year plan that you might have heard of. That's where the legislature puts together the spending for state and federal dollars on transportation. And that's certainly one way, it's an important way to make some of this vision happen. But there's a lot of stuff on your list. And if you think you're going to accomplish all of that and address the traffic needs in the next 10 or 15 years using that mechanism only, you got another thing coming. I mean, there's just not enough money to go around, unfortunately. But there are some key things that, I put this list together that I think, and I guess Casey didn't disagree with it. These are some things that you might want to focus on trying to get projects using that mechanism. So there's improvements on 876 where you're widening and improving the traffic flow there, the interchange project, and maybe even the intersection up at Tates Creek Road and Goggins Lane. Do you want to hit on any of the
Sure.
Because we just had the state highway plan, it comes out every 2 years, that was just approved this spring, so there were some projects listed that came out as a result of the work that we did. So Casey can give you a briefing on.
So as Brent and I were talking about, this was the time where I pull up my binder filled with government secrets here. This is what I have here is the House Bill 266. This was the signed bill signed by the governor. Signed by the governor on May 9th. It is an enacted document, and sometime, well, it should be a little bit later this month, we should be seeing the official publicized 2024 enacted highway plan, which has a list of so many projects in there. Now, there were 3 projects that came out of this study that is in the highway plan. The interchange that you all saw with the Spewey, that made it into the next highway plan with National Highway federal dollars. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that single point urban interchange. It could be a divergent diamond. It could be adding lanes. Hopefully not just adding lanes on it because that won't go far. But it does. The way this plan was set up, it does leave opportunity for alternative, maybe even innovative type interchanges as it goes through a design process. So there is design funding in this next highway plan to look at that. Now there's 2 other projects that are shown in the highway plan, but I can't give much promises on whether it could be delivered or not. The other one is it's Barnesville Road that goes from the interchange out to Goggins Lane, and including a potential roundabout at that location. The thing is with that one, it is programmed with state dollars, and the thing with state dollars within the highway plan is that it is historically over-programmed, greatly over-programmed. The federal program is not over-programmed. It'll be over-programmed by maybe about 10%. The thing with the federal program is that they do expect us to demonstrate fiscal constraint with their funding. So when projects have a federal project or funding code on that plan, chances are it is good money that we would be able to authorize off of. But Barnesville Road is still state funded. Another one is a connection between Goggins to Victory Way, right by a church that goes out on the north side that connects to US 25. That is also another project I believe Judge Taylor is really interested in that project. However, that was also allocated state funding.
All gardens,
No, he's talking about what we know as Old Goggins Lane.
okay.
The road goes
country,
That's what I'm talking about, though.
That on to.
It doesn't.
So that needs to improve if you're gonna put any traffic on it.
So
Yeah,
it won't go
because-
to, it won't go to Jack Creek, it'll go to Lexington.
Lexington Road to Old Goggins.
So go up to about the top of the hill,
Thompson.
behind the new development, and then all that to kind of where Keystone Drive is, that kind of area.
That's it.
Yeah, it was on there,
That's gotta be
it was mixed
expensive.
in with a bunch of other.
It's hard to control. So, you can, so this one right here, so follows
Right here.
the road and then it would tie into Victory Boulevard up here.
It'll be up there.
But yeah, it's right up here.
Through that blue area.
Mhm. And there's Goggins Lane right there. So those were 3 projects, you know, Brent has showed you so many different improvement concepts that we had on this study. Only 3 made it, and only 1 had federal funds on it. So that's where Brent's getting to the, I'm talking about here. You can't really rely on the state to completely deliver the improvement concepts entirely, and if you do, yeah, I'm sure you'll be greatly disappointed, you know, because the funding is just not really
So
there.
you can't allow the state, that's just,
Yeah.
Well, for
It
state,
depends on what you mean by the state. What we mean is the legislature, that gives the money, not the employees that's transportation.
That's where your political leaders that you elect to represent you.
I'm Morris, and I'm the governor. Those are 2 concepts that are very hard to get.
Okay, so there were 2. See, you had 3. What were the 3? And I got the Barnesville dog, was the traffic circle, the second.
So we have the interchange, the I-75 interchange at Barnesville. That's the first one. That's the one that has the federal funds allocated to it.
that's what's locking there.
What's the time frame or something like that when it's already got federal dollars?
It takes, so we only have design funds on it, and of course, there are out years into the highway plan when we get that, actual enacted publication, we'll actually see what the out years are for right-of-way utilities. The reason why we looked at the single urban interchange, is because it doesn't require so much right-of-way acquisition. Of course, we're really tight on real estate at that interchange, so we won't be able to do much with right-of-way.
Is that the one that required the new bridge, or was that the crossover?
It would require a new bridge, yeah. And the other thing that we looked at too,
That's gonna change that bridge.
the other thing that we were looking into, Brent mentioned about bike bed, accommodations. Currently, there's no sidewalk or anything going across that interchange. We did notice that over on the southeast quadrant of that interchange, we do see most of people tend to.
Is there any hope of an extension of the old, what you call Old Jack Street? Not Jack Street, but Gardens Lane. Old Gardens Lane, which is US 25. That would give another route to totally get across. I know we mentioned it, but what's the chances? Because that's got to be expensive. Because those hills up there, you've got to level that out.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be far less than doing the interchange project. If the interchange project, it would cost upwards of about 45 million to do. But something like that wouldn't cost nearly as much. I believe there are some utility issues. I mean, we may run into in that area.
Yeah,
Gas lines, yeah.
Electric substation, 2 of them.
There's 2, at least 2.
So that part would be tricky. However, Goggins is a county route. Is it city or county? Maybe part of it's city.
That part of the audience is county.
County.
Good Goggins is a city to go.
If you build something like that, if you build something on Goggins,
Yeah, that's right. For
Cause they wanted to figure out where that school came out.
That would help siphon some traffic off that area. Unless you're gonna be able to go under I-75, you're gonna have some troubles.
We do see the benefit of distributing the traffic on the north side. Maybe it might relieve some of the traffic off Barnesville so people would access the interstate on the exit 91 as opposed to 87. However, it would be, looking at it from a system standpoint, a transportation system standpoint, it would be a road that would just head in onto a local road. And so
And they have an added benefit, when US 25 keeps getting backed up, it would allow us to siphon some traffic off of that. So it has, the road goes both ways. And so that seems to me to be a beneficial thing to do.
I think for like Barnes Mill is already a very congested roadway. If they were between the two, and this is just my gut feeling, like I said, this is all political too. Barnes Mill may be the one that might move forward over Victory Way. That's just my perspective.
But what is it you're gonna do on Barnesville that makes it better?
There's several things. So we are looking at access management as well as roundabout over at Goggins. Part of the units, a lot of collisions
They're
happen.
not reducing the flow of traffic,
And
they're not siphoning anything off.
It would require, it would widen it to Goggins Lane.
I mean, I see the
Inverting
business.
that intersection.
I see the utility of
Probably
it, but I don't know
problems
why
back
that's
then.
better than Goggins. Goggins has two major points. One, it would help siphon some traffic off of Goggins Lane and Tate's Creek there. And two, when I-75 backs up and US 25 backs up, that's all anybody, you hear people, I get caught in it at least once a week. And people probably, it would be interesting, and it wouldn't benefit me so much, but it would benefit a lot of people to swing over and get to the bypass and get home. It seems to me.
Siphoning traffic is one part, of course. Yeah, we do like to distribute traffic. It does help. However, traffic flow is also another thing.
I agree. I'm not arguing with you about it's not a good thing. I just think your priority. I think tolerance.
Yeah, I mean, but they're both state-funded projects. Okay, so it's not really up to me on what gets authorized. I'm just giving kind of a perspective from this. Yeah.
And the projects obviously that got in there, Casey and I didn't have anything to do with, except for giving the ideas. So,
Exactly.
Alright, nobody is anxious to leave right at the moment. Okay, so there's also other transportation grants that are out there. One of the most widely known ones is CAP, and it's often used for walking and biking types of projects. And so there were a few. One was to basically create a shared use path, which is right now you have a sidewalk out on Goggins Lane. This would make it where it's wider. It makes it more accessible for biking and for traffic in both directions, for walking and biking.
Those school children down there.
And then we also have a section on Tates Creek Road that we recommended for a shared use path. So these are projects that kind of stand alone. They're not part of a bigger road project. So that would be one avenue if you wanted to pursue that. Okay, so our consulting team consisted of both our engineering. It was three firms. Two of which were engineering, one which was a land use planning firm, which you're familiar with, or probably are, TSW. They've done some work on your comprehensive plan. So it's nice that they had the understanding of what was going on here and were involved. But in the end, they gave us some recommendations to pass along to you all to consider in your process to try to help support some of this moving forward. And one of the things I'll just let you know, full disclosure, I was introduced as working for the Transportation Cabinet, but in my spare time, I'm the chair of the Franklin County Planning Commission. So I understand what it's like to sit in your all seats. So it's my hobby, just if you want. So.
That's why you came up with the term well thought out planning.
That's right.
I wonder where you were getting that. That didn't come from the state.
So one of the recommendations that they came up with was to start by adopting this study as part of your comprehensive plan. So creating a new appendix, I'm sure you have several appendices in the back of your comp plan. Whatever letter is the last one, make this the next one and adopt it. And so then it has something that, then you have as a resource when you're making decisions. And as part of that would be to also update the transportation elements, the maps that are in there to reflect. And then you could take our whole study and everything that's in there, and of course, you can also take bits and pieces. If there's things that you don't like, you don't have to put it in there, right? It's your decision. But, the whole process, as Bert can attest, we tried to, this was not just a state-led study, we were trying to get input from staff and local officials here so that it's a joint city, county, and state plan. So that's one step. We also have, I showed you that typical section right there for a collector road. So these new collector roads is to come up with a standard and put that into your subdivision standards. Once again, it will look just like this in terms of the configuration and the widths. If you think it needs to be something different, that's okay too. But this is really meant to try to accommodate the volumes, the turning movements, the bikes, the pedestrians, and to provide safe crossings, as well as what does it look like for the development that faces these roads. Another important piece is that we have to deal with on all of our roadway projects is acquiring right-of-way, so buying property. And the biggest problem is that a lot of times there's a vision for a new road, but it takes years and years and years to happen, and by the time it happens, where you think it should be built, now there's a new subdivision in the way, or a new shopping center in the way. So you either have to go around it, which makes the road longer, or you have to buy it, which makes it really expensive. So one of the things that you all can do is if you have this vision as you're going through the development process, is to set aside the land. In some cases, like where we're talking about widening Barnes Mill Road, if you have the development plans that you're considering, is to make sure that there's enough space left on the backyards of those houses to allow for our widening, and so we don't have to eat into people's backyards or take people's houses later on. So it makes the project much more doable in the future when the funds become available.
None of the roads you showed were moved out, they're just expanded.
For the state routes, yes. Mm-hmm. Now that may also come into effect on the new routes or the local routes. This could be a combination of different approaches to things. It may be where you have a development where you can work with the developer to build the section so their property goes across where one of those lines is, and they build that line as part of their development plan. So from property line to property line, and then but there may be a situation where that doesn't work, but at the very least you want to make sure that you have the property there so it can be built in the future, however that would happen. And then the last thing on that list is, I'll say a new concept, at least as far as I'm aware in Kentucky. It's not been used very much, but it's not a new concept at all. It's called an impact fee. I don't know, have you all ever heard of something like that? It's basically an assessment on development that
New development?
on new development, yes, that then is pulled together. So just think of a bank account, and each development is paying so much, and that money can then be used for public infrastructure. So it can be used for roads, it can also be used for parks, it can be used for schools or libraries. The local government makes a decision on how much money that's going to be and what it's going to be used for.
So now, let me clarify on that right there. What you're saying is, if I want to put in a new subdivision, we would enact this impact fee program where I gotta pay so much just to be allowed to do this.
That would be, so, yeah, in a way, yes. Let me explain though, is that typically it can be done on residential, it can be also done on commercial, and it would be like for each house, a certain amount of money is
Each house or?
each household.
Traffic that's anticipated.
That's right. So it could be, if let's say you're building townhouses or apartments, those households are going to be similar impact as a single family house. So you make a decision on how you assess.
Shopping center might bring more traffic.
That's right. So you may charge them. There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can put more of the burden on commercial, or more on residential, or equal. wanna basically think about what the impacts are gonna be, what each of those is going to bring. So if we're just focusing on roads or transportation, then, you know, how much, you first start out with, what is it, your objective, what are you trying to build? What are the things so we laid out this plan, let's say you're gonna follow this plan to a T, you add up the cost of everything in there, and then what's the projected development, and you divide that, and you come up with a number.
Might be a good way to try to develop elsewhere.
That's
a
possible.
question about how that translates to existing tracks that might benefit from it and existing residents that might already be on that road and how it affects them. It's fairly new, isn't it? I mean, it's a new
Well,
concept.
I would say it's not really been done too much in Kentucky that I'm aware of, but there are other states where it's been used a lot. I was looking today at Savannah, Georgia, which, you know, Savannah's not too bad of a model.
So we kind of require, you know, developers, if he wants to develop a farm at the end of that road, he's got to upgrade that road, right? So that's gonna be his cost, that's not gonna be the county's expense or the state's expense.
That's right. Sample
Development.
ordinances.
But
Sample ordinances for IP programs.
there are,
Any sample ordinances? For
Sure,
example,
yeah.
Savannah's ordinance.
yeah, I mean, that was a good one that I saw, because they laid out everything on their website where they had the fee structure. So for each type of land use, it had the actual ordinance, it had, what was the third piece to it? Anyhow, you know, that would be something to look at.
In
There's
some respects, we're doing that already.
Yes.
Well, you are and you're not. Okay, so the developer's building a road in his subdivision, well, that's just to benefit him.
We're talking about the road to get to the city.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So if you got 18-foot wide county road, and you want to develop a major subdivision, you gotta widen that county road to 20 feet.
Okay, so in some cases you have something like that, but if you think about it, like, I know that we've had lots of cases that come in front of us, and you might have, let's say, a hotel. Okay, well, a hotel's gonna generate some traffic, and maybe do a traffic impact study that shows, well, they're not really making too much of an impact on that traffic signal there, so we're not gonna make them do anything, okay? But that hotel is having some impact, and that hotel combined with these 5 restaurants that each by themselves is not too bad. And so if you can assess each one of them based on their impact, they're paying their prorated share of the improvements. So, you know, each household and each shopping center, each restaurant, each office building is creating an impact. And so it's
I can see that more in the commercial setting, we've got existing roads that these commercial projects are gonna come in, and they wouldn't necessarily improve from like a lighting standpoint, like you all would be with. We're talking about more like projects like you're talking about, like interchanges and exits and commercial type roads as opposed to residential.
Well, but if
You either pay an impact fee, if you don't have to widen the road, pay X
Yeah, we
amount.
don't have anything already, so okay, you know, if somebody brings me a site development plan tomorrow for a hotel at the 95 exit, on County Road, or on a state highway, for that matter, we don't have anything in our regulations say, okay, if you put a hotel in, you gotta make sure you got at least 12-foot wide lanes and a center turn lane, so we don't have anything that our road requirements are strictly for residential development.
Yeah, and the problem is that, you know, you could put in make them put in a small turning lane, and let's say they have the opportunity to do that. That's gonna have some benefit, but minimal benefit in your overall scheme of things. And so this allows you to plan bigger, because I mean, you all have big plans for this area. And it's really making everybody pay their fair share.
The difference in this group, have y'all presented this to the city yet?
No.
I'll be anxious to see what their reaction
Yeah.
to this is, because this group is gonna deal more with rural, low density, residential for the most part development, with the exception of a couple of areas. This traffic study, even this study, the parts of it that are in the county are still fairly undeveloped rural farm agriculture land. Now, Lawrenceville, Tates Creek, all that's been annexed into the city now, so even at that, they won't have to deal with something like you're talking about now, with an impact fee. They certainly want to be involved in in the collector routes and the widening and the appendix and the transportation maps and that kind of, to be sure, but something like this, I think, will not make it.
But you gotta think about it, every house that you all approve, that's not in the city, you're all approving it, is having an impact on all the roads that you all, and we deal with this in Frankfurt, you get this imaginary line, the city line here, and everybody on the other side is the county, and it's two separate things, but in reality, you're one community, so it's kinda like.
And that's
It's not my
The federal project you're talking about's in the city. That's a city project.
What's that?
The federal project you're talking about, the interchange crossing over I-75, that's in the city.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, that's why the city's been involved in this project just like I have. I mean, they've been there, all meetings and everything too. Because it was a large city, touched both city and county quite a bit, but even, that's what I say, even the parts of this study that aren't in the city are still, right now, there's things we can do, but I don't know that the impact fee will be something that we would need to. The city doesn't worry about dumping traffic out in the county. County probably doesn't worry about dumping traffic on the city or the state.
I don't know, I mean, I think if I'm living, I'm gonna stop arguing here in a second, but if I'm living out in some of these new subdivisions out in the county, and I'm having to go through all that traffic on Goggins Lane and the intersections and to the shopping center, and I'm gonna be ticked off every time I go there, and I'm wanting somebody to do that, you know, but if you charge $2,000 for each house that got built out.
Where's that money go? Is it going into the city to fix those problems that they've created inside the city limits? Or does the county use it for widening the road that doesn't really need to be widened?
That would
In
be
the city.
Yeah, that would be decided on structurally, like, is that a joint thing, or is it just the county? I mean, that would be.
That's the problem,
Yeah.
that's the issue.
That is
Sure.
the issue. Now, where this would be good is Duncan Lane, because none of that's been developed.
You know, that's, those are money stay out.
If we're gonna go outside the project area.
But I mean, it's still Madison County property, and at some point, that property.
Not much of it,
Well,
most of it's been annexed.
but that road goes right on out there toward me, and that hadn't been annexed to anybody.
But you get a brand new big super highway, state highway all the way out to you.
But that's, I mean, that's.
Yeah,
that's
it
where
all
some of
works
those
together, I'm not
projects-
suggesting it doesn't.
Yeah.
But somebody mentioned hurting development too. If you put 2,000 per household fee on somebody, to build a subdivision.
I don't know, if it's a $300,000 house, is $2,000 gonna stop you from buying it?
Might stop you from developing.
It might stop you from
It
developing,
won't
yeah.
stop you from buying it, it'll stop you from developing.
You guys have a question?
I have a question, or maybe I do. I'm gonna go outside your project area, and since it was, Duncan was mentioned, I'll mention another one. And it seems like if it were possible, it's not land problem, but you know, the underpass that we have under I-75 near the, yeah, on Trumbull Road? Why isn't that 2 lanes? I mean, that would help reduce traffic considerably.
I will
It's
say-
not for me, it'd be help you a little.
Look, they've looked at bringing that Simpson Lane all the way out to the intersection off of
Okay.
Martin Bypass, but we can't buy the property.
But this is no property situation, this is right under I-75, just make it.
We did study that, if I had the right.
Yeah, well, we did a small urban area study that included that portion and all the way up to exit 95. Judge Taylor asked us to include that.
Oh,
Yeah, so, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but you gotta think about.
I drive by there and I drive by there every day, there's cars back, during the busy morning and late afternoon, there's cars backed up both ways. And if there were just 2 lanes,
But what I'm saying is, if you extend the road, you don't even need the wagon box.
well, that's fine too.
Yeah.
You think you can do that, but I'm trying to find something where you don't buy all land.
Huh?
Just
Yeah, I lived out there too. I know the drill of waiting when it's supposed to be your turn and 3 other cars come through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So I go over the bridge.
alright, so we don't have to keep you all here all night, one of the products that came out of our study is what we call the cheat sheet. And this is something that can be used, while you're looking at development plans. It's a 3-step process. is it an improvement or is a development or a zoning case happening within the study area? Yes or no? If it is, then we move on to step 2. And what are we looking for? Well, we may be looking for dedication of right of way, or construction of a section of new road. Obviously, you deal with all 3 of these things, right?
That'd be a good layer on your GIS.
We got to adopt it, we might not agree with this.
Well,
That's right. But no, I mean, yeah, you all would have to
And
adopt it
y'all
first.
remember, you all might agree with it, but Phil Fort Myers, so any change to our
I'm in
regulation,
favor of anything the city has to do.
any changes that y'all might recommend or think are good ideas, we gotta run them up the chain, right? So it'll be my job to kind of weed through some of this and have conversations with them and the elected officials to see what's palatable and what's not, and come up with a plan on how we want to incorporate this, if we want to incorporate this, and go forward from there.
It seems like there's just two of the 3 involved with the county. And that's what you're talking about, the fiscal court, what they're gonna do?
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna give any money towards the bridge, the crossover I-75.
I'll be clear,
Probably
only
they
talk about-
want to adopt any aspect or portion of this plan, do they think it's a good idea, do they want to incorporate any of it into our comprehensive plan or our land use regulations? That's all I'm talking about, the money is getting built, that's somebody else's decision down the road to make.
there are a lot of projects.
Just getting our plan laid out.
There are a lot of projects that were listed in our plan. We talked about a few of them, but there were other ones that.
I'll forward y'all copies, so you can look at it at your leisure, you can break down short-term projects, long-term projects, timelines, that kind of thing, and that won't necessarily change your response to it right now, but that way you got time to kind of digest it a little bit, and then we'll revisit it again.
So you got this in like a PDF that you can send to us?
So I got the PowerPoint right here.
Yeah,
If I forward that to.
Yeah, actually, we printed some copies of the presentation.
Actually, if you want to get access to it and you got a smartphone, you can scan the QR code and that'll take you right to our website that has the study online.
Presentation on there too.
It takes you to the Transportation Cabinet website where our studies are located. Yeah.
Presentation.
No, it is not. So if you want to forward it.
I'll forward y'all the PowerPoint.
So while Casey's passing it out, Shane had something he wanted to say.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know, the reason I chimed in there is, I'm not from here, I'm actually from Casey County. But I live in Madison County, been here the last 20 years, married a girl from Waco. So I know, and I sit in all these meetings and tried to see, and everybody gave me a lot of flack, saying, well, you're just trying to get a better road from Lexington to Waco. Well, maybe, yeah, because that's where I drive to every day, but to Mr. Klaus's point about the schools, we, as a cabinet, we get put behind the 8 ball on a lot of schools, because the school boards will go out and try to find the cheapest piece of property they can find, build the school, and then come back to the cabinet and expect us to fix it. Same with this top, if you develop, what my point is that if you continue to develop and do what has been done in the past in Madison County, I'm afraid that it's gonna be a situation where you're coming to the state asking us to fix it, and we just don't have time. We gotta spread it out everywhere in order to fix everything. I'd like to fix 52. I mean, I said through 3 cycles every time I go home trying to turn left on 52.
It's the most common question I get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the gist to the whole presentation is that you have an opportunity to really take the future in your own hands. Planning, good planning, and it's important. And too many times, what I've seen all over our state is that we tend not to plan. We have to do this. We have to react, and our version of planning is to react to a problem as opposed to foreseeing what we need.
Whatever school decides, like the one we've got being built now, I'm sure it's gonna be a great school. We're going to have a lot of great scholars go through that school. How much, is there anything that requires them to talk traffic with anybody other than I guess maybe they came, that, I wasn't here when they came through here, but. Is there anything that talks traffic?
Well, I mean, if it's on a state road, yes, but,
If it's on a county road?
that would be up to local leadership to dive into that issue.
Well, I don't know if that wouldn't be, if the good representative started this study, that wouldn't be a good, piece of, good law that requires the school not only to take into account traffic patterns, but fire protection, ambulance, policing, those sorts of things.
They should
And I would,
have, they should have to.
Yeah, and I would back that up by saying, just because Goggins was county, city now when the school's built, every bit of the traffic goes on two state routes, Tates Creek and Barnesville.
Yeah.
So that needs to be looked at, even though it doesn't encroach upon our highway, somebody needs to take a look at that.
Well, there needs to be a much more focused plan, I guess also for any, industrial or commercial development as well, but schools seem to, not, 2 times a day, they back up, gum up the works almost everywhere they're at. It does seem to be, and they build road storage lanes, storage roads, to push the traffic off the main roads. Yeah.
I think other schools in the county will model that, like, there's rumors Waco's getting some new schools. And where they wanna put Waco's is right off Speedwell Road.
Yeah,
Apparently,
I don't know anything else that was answer any more questions or.
let's give this to them and, digest a little bit if y'all have any questions or stuff that comes up after you look through this plan, let me know and I can get with these guys and try to get you some answers. But other than that, we'll kind of, just what I said, we'll look through it and talk to some of our elected officials and see what our path forward can be.
next time we come, maybe we'll have that big cardboard.
Thank both of you, fellas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, you all did a nice job.
Hey, every time we lose money,
Tell us that.
and is there anything else to come before the committee?
That's all I got.
And a motion to adjourn, proceeding order.
Good night.
Yes.
Good night. Yes.
Yep. Adam?
Yes.
So I got to.
Yes,
There's no citizens gonna be coming bitching at you. So be glad that that's happening.
I just want what's rightfully mine. The whole world.
Maybe get the Pope to do something for us.
I'll put in the good work.
That's it.
You got a straight line.
Pretty well built.
No, we'll see you. We're gonna see you. I got a straight line.
Hey, you already lied for me.
It was a great book. Yeah. I think yes. I got worried because he was coming next week, and I called him on Saturday. Hey,
He told me, yeah,
yeah.
I'll go away next week.
So yeah. So anyway, I'm hopeful. But it is great to see him.
See you later.
Mhm.